think a lot of people are kind of just viewing the internet as an entertainment space, when I really think that it's going to be the future of our economies in many ways. Our current society tries to tell us that we have to be kind of cookie cutters. We have to follow one particular path, but I think that the internet has really opened the door to people truly being themselves and exploring themselves. I've often included a prompt to something, and then the AI picked up on something that I was intending but didn't say. And that's where it starts to get perhaps a little scary, because it's able to pick up on things that I wasn't even aware of. So it doesn't have to just be NFTs. You can start to use the NFT almost like a key to give access to other forms of content. And I think that's probably what will excite more people than just trying to sell a piece of like a JPEG for $1,000. I think that usually turns people off. So I think if we start thinking about Web3 more as the identity side of things rather than just the NFT and the monetization side of things, we'll probably pave the way to more people adopting these systems.
Hello everyone, a very happy 2025 to all. Welcome to episode 2 of Is This the New Internet? And you've just heard excerpts from my guest, Calum Wanderloots. By trading his law career for a life of professional independence, Callum is now thriving. He has a rapidly growing YouTube channel and is my go-to for learning about new online tools. His catalog of content is extensive, and he's a staple of my online content consumption. Callum adds a refreshing sense of calm to an online sphere with plenty of noise. We cover a lot in this episode. We dive into how his life and photography has helped shape his worldview and his journey as an educational content creator. We talk about the tools needed to thrive in today's online world, such as Notebook LM and Obsidian, as well as how we can prepare for the influx of AI tools. I want this podcast to help shine a light on the internet's potential to foster continuous independent learning, and most importantly, to get you thinking about how this looks for you. I also hope Callum's honest insights about building a life enriched by online community can help serve as an encouragement for you to take that creative leap for yourself. So without any further ado, let's transport you back to my conversation with Calum Wanderloots. Good morning, Callum, and welcome to the show. Could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, please? And you can also start by giving us your most controversial take on the internet while you're at it.
I feel like what sums me up the most is that I just find ideas fascinating, and the ability of humans to really develop as a society and push ourselves forward in new ways. I think, like you're saying, the internet has really opened the door to this in ways that we haven't ever seen before. I think the singularity that we had with the internet when it first came out and progressively since has changed everything about the way we think of communication. So for myself, I've always been fascinated with finding the new thing, learning. I just love learning. I would say it's probably what gives me the biggest dopamine rush and probably gives me the most fulfillment in life. So for my undergrad, I went to Queen's for mechanical engineering, and I specialized in materials science, which is kind of getting more into nanotechnology. So for me, I thought, okay, that's going to be the most cutting edge that I can do with engineering at the moment. Let's go into that. But I kind of realized that I didn't really enjoy doing the practical experimentation, because that just takes so many years to actually get anywhere to reach that, like, the epiphany, that big changing moment. So I thought perhaps maybe going to law school and becoming an intellectual property lawyer would be a way that I could still be involved with the idea generation process and facilitating the engineers and the other people that were doing the research. So I became a patent agent and worked as a patent agent for a couple of years. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, I did definitely work with some clients that had cutting edge things that were changing the way we're going to look at the world. But I also had to do a lot of work that was a little more boring and menial. So I kind of got sick of that and quit about a year and a half ago. It was June 2023, to become a full-time content creator, educator, and I would say just artist in general. So for myself, I like trying to blend different disciplines together. I think that we've kind of moved beyond the singular path that our parents' generation went through, where you just became good at one thing, and then that's kind of what you dedicated your whole life and your career to. I think with the advent of the internet and the ability to learn from everyone everywhere and the ability to monetize across the world, we've really opened the door to layering our different interests and skills, so we don't have to niche down so specifically like we did in the past. So I'm excited to do that with YouTube, with Instagram, with Warpcast, to generally layer these different technologies to hopefully allow myself to just explore whatever it is I'm most passionate and interested about. In terms of what the most controversial take on the internet, I was thinking about this a little bit. I liked your questions. They were really well laid out. And that was the first one. I thought that was pretty funny. But I would say I feel like the biggest issue that we're facing right now is maybe not a controversial one, but one that people aren't thinking about. It's kind of behind the scenes almost, which is just the general attention economy and the fact that our attention is being mined in so many different ways through advertising, through different products, through different companies. And people don't recognize the impact that their digital identities are going to have in the future. So I think a lot of people are kind of just viewing the internet as an entertainment space when I really think that it's going to be the future of our economies in many ways. So I think perhaps the controversial take would be that blockchain is going to have a much bigger impact than it's currently having. I think we've seen crypto getting a little more exciting for people in the last couple of months, but I've been in that since 2021. And actually, I began researching blockchain and crypto back in 2018 when I was in law school. I was researching solutions to fake news and thought that blockchain seemed like a good fit. And bringing that up with people over the last 7 years has probably been the most controversial, triggering response that I tend to get from people.
Where does the criticism of saying that blockchains could be the solution to fake news, where does that come from?
I think there's probably two sides to it. The first is that people don't appreciate the impact that artificial intelligence is going to have on our ability to actually gauge what is true versus what is fiction. This is where people, I think, get AI anxiety, where they just prefer not to think about it. They enter into a state of moral panic and kind of deny that these things are happening. And they would just prefer to remain in ignorance, which is another reason why I'm so interested in education, because I'm trying to combat that ignorance a little bit and show people that there is a path forward that's not going to be so dysregulating to them and perhaps can reduce their anxiety. And the other main trigger, I would say, or dysregulating effect would be that it's such a disruption on the economy. People don't like to think about the intangible world. They like what they can see and touch and taste and smell. They don't really like the thought that we could be shifting our entire economy into a cashless ecosystem that goes on blockchain that's outside of government control, because they are familiar with their current understanding of how the system operates. And this new system kind of throws that all into disruption. So I think when people start to consider the ramifications on what it means to have this almost like extra jurisdictional economic system being built through blockchain, it removes their entire perspective on their worldview and everything that they've known. So they kind of get thrown into the unknown in a way that they're not very familiar with.
You mentioned crypto as a way of, there's a lot of monetization that can happen very, very easily. Anyone can launch a token, anyone can sort of monetize a community. So how do you think this will work with our understandings currently of the attention economy? And do you think the wider space needs to develop in some way in order to embrace these tools better?
Yes, I think so. I think what we kind of saw as the main developing business model over the last 15 years, really since Facebook took off in probably 2007, 2008, was the business model of surveillance capitalism, where we use big data to target consumers with advertising, and then that's what funnels the actual development or promotes the development of these tools further. So we end up having all of these algorithms get developed that are recommendation engines that are targeting people's attention based on specific, uh, I would say, ulterior motives, but pretty transparent motives by the companies that they're a business and trying to make money. So it's not as though they're, for example, trying to destroy democracy. That could just be an unintended side effect. We'll see what happens there. But I would say that with crypto, with blockchain, with traditional social media, we've seen a lot of these algorithms being developed, and that's effectively just machine learning. It's a subset of artificial intelligence. And I think as the internet continues to develop and we see artificial intelligence becoming more prevalent across the board, I think that we're going to start to see people become more interested in perhaps gating content so that it doesn't get fed into artificial intelligence models. I think that crypto provides a really interesting way to enable cross-platform gating and cross-platform control of the content that's being distributed by individuals. For example, if you put something on Instagram, Instagram effectively owns it. It's for sure being fed into Meta's AI model. It's kind of hard to backtrack from there. They've got it. They can do, for the most part, what they want with it. But as we start to introduce layers to the internet, one of them being perhaps a token layer or the Web3 layer, we'll start to see perhaps people beginning to more intentionally, more mindfully curate the information and the resources, the content, the art that they're putting out there, not necessarily just as default into the traditional Web2 ecosystem, but also behind things like paywalls. And I think this is where, for example, the Patreon model has been very successful for a long time. I think people recognize that there is value in scarcity and there's value in exclusivity. And there's, of course, a balance between exclusivity, scarcity, and abundance, which is kind of what we're at with the current internet. So I could see going away from this Web 2 model of pure abundance where everything is free and the audience expects everything for free, to being able to shift some things back towards scarcity, which can then, by definition, increase the value of the content that's being produced. So I think crypto just provides a really nice way to do that, not within a specific walled garden, not being reliant particularly on Patreon or YouTube or Instagram, but instead being able to use a crypto wallet as sort of a digital identity indicator that can cross all platforms and really open the door to a lot more customization in the creator economy.
Very cool. And so, as a big believer in ENS, Ethereum name servers, I think having that identity is something I'm kind of proud of, right? You get to show all the different services that you use, all the creators who you support, and you can kind of very easily embed yourself as you in that space. It doesn't have to be your real name. And how do you think that this unified identity can be helpful for people right now? Let's say there's a digital artist who has a presence on like a DeviantArt and wants to shift over into the NFT and the scarce digital art space. Do you see any direct channels or any easy onboarding or any like a cheat sheet, for example, for them to get on there in a way that doesn't expose themselves to all these data scraping tools while also retaining some semblance of their artistic integrity?
So what comes to mind is probably Hypersub as the Web3 Patreon. I think that they're doing a lot of very interesting things. Effectively, you just pay a small amount or whatever the rate is per month. So it's a subscription-based crypto product, which is a time-bound NFT, which is different than what we've typically seen with the one-of-ones or the editions of NFTs. So I think that using a subscription model rather than selling individual assets can be an interesting way to onboard people because they're very familiar with the concept of membership platforms like Patreon. So I think that that's probably a nice bridge between Web 2 and Web 3. And my understanding is that Hypersub's opening up some new features in the new year where they'll be enabling token gating of content. So, for example, I could upload my Obsidian starter kit as a markdown file folder onto my Hypersub and make it available to only people who subscribe to Hypersub. So it doesn't have to just be NFTs. You can start to use the NFT almost like a key to give access to other forms of content. And I think that's probably what will excite more people than just trying to sell a piece of like a JPEG for $1,000. I think that usually turns people off. So I think if we start thinking about Web3 more as the identity side of things rather than just the NFT and the monetization side of things, we'll probably pave the way to more people adopting these systems.
Amazing. Thanks a lot. I think this is going to be something really useful for artists because we've had the discussion AFK before that the idea of the PFP NFTs selling for multiple millions, why that grabs a lot of attention, it's only a tiny, tiny percentage of artists who are actually benefiting from all this. How does the digital space and collectibles work in just the wider set of revenue streams that an artist today can try and tap into?
I think the best way to frame it is to just consider that the internet is made of layers. And we had the Web 1 layer, which was more like blog posts, the read era. Then we had the Web 2 era, which is the read and write, where you're able to post on social media. The post really got created. And then we got into Web 3, which is the third layer, And that's more of the token layer, where we're able to not only share something, but we're able to own it, the read, write, own. So I think that it's important to keep the layers in mind, because a lot of people just want to do 100% one thing or 100% the other. They go all in, and they don't really consider that diversifying their portfolio of income generating actions is probably going to be more strategic in the long run. So I think that for myself, like I use Farcaster, Warpcast as my primary social media, aside from YouTube, but that's more long form production than it is, I would say, social media. And I tend to go in cycles with that, where there's something going on in crypto, people are all excited about it, then I spend more energy in that area because it ends up being more lucrative and more efficient and effective from an economic perspective. But then when things kind of dip, or for example, like there's the meme coin mania, I tend to step back a little from that because I don't love the speculative nature as much. I prefer more the concrete encapsulation of value and how creators are able to distribute that in different ways. So I think if you can use Hypersub, for example, you're able to begin using both Web 2 and Web 3 tools, and then you can kind of pick and choose the different revenue streams that are going to make the most sense in a given moment. So I think that the key here is everyone's building a digital identity through various social media platforms, which could be, for example, LinkedIn. Like it's not just limited to what we think of traditionally as social media. And I think the more that people start to consider that what they're building here is actually a personal brand, and that brand can bridge between different social medias, the more you start to recognize that it's probably better to build up your distribution systems in a few different ways. And I think that really you can look at all these social media platforms as just practice with developing your voice. Because I think the creator's voice, the artist's voice, their particular expression, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, it could be just art as well. I think the more people have practice with actually presenting that information through the internet, the more they'll be able to build up those communities. And I think those communities are really what make for a sustainable creator lifestyle.
This talk of NFTs and collectibles, it really makes you think about your forays into astrophotography and wildlife photography. It's one of my favorite parts of Farcaster because I really don't think that there's enough art on there. You're one of the few people who's consistently adding stuff to the art meta over there. So tell me a little bit about this, because in one you're looking down, the other one you're looking up. Like, there must be different frames of mind that you need to engage in to do astrophotography versus wildlife photography. There must be a lot of logistics and planning and equipment, and also then the post-production and then the optimizing and everything. So can you like walk me through your processes, how you break down something so complex to give us this end product that a lot of us don't normally give too much thought of the process in making that product?
Sure. So I would say that the reason that photography interests me so much is probably my engineering side coming in, because it's just pure problem solving. Everyone who has a camera has the same buttons, they have the same technology, they have the same ability to take a photo. What changes is their mastery over the controls of the camera and their perspective, the frame of reference that they're using to set the composition. So it's a mix of, I think, the artistic style, the creative framing of the shot, and then the technical understanding of how to actually expose the sensor properly so that you can get the shot that you're hoping for. So wildlife and astro are at complete opposite ends of the spectrum with this. So perhaps that's also why I find them so interesting, because through my experience with both, I've had to really stretch my understanding of how to use my camera. Because with wildlife, you want to have it basically be as like absolutely quick as possible, because if the wildlife is moving, you're going to get a blurry shot. So you have to understand how to capture not only the sharpness, but also prevent the motion so you can capture the wildlife in their natural habitat, which often involves being in a jungle, for example, or in the dark, early morning for sunrise. And that's kind of where my understanding of astro comes in, because they're both involving low light. So what a lot of people don't think about is the impact of light on photography and how much it actually changes your ability to expose the shot properly. So with astrophotography, on the opposite end of wildlife, you do a lot of what's called long exposure photography. So for wildlife, I might be shooting at a frame rate or a shutter speed of maybe 1/4000th of a second, so incredibly fast. And for astrophotography, I might be doing 15 seconds. So it's potentially thousands of times slower to take that shot. So with astrophotography, you end up having a lot of tripod-based shots because you can't have any motion. Whereas wildlife, you're potentially running around trying to keep up with a lemur jumping through the jungles of Madagascar. So they both involve very different skills. With wildlife, I love that I'm able to really immerse myself into the animal's habitat and go explore, which is one of my favorite things to do. Whereas with Astro, I love that I can just hit go on the camera, and I often take a lot of time lapses. So once I've set up the composition, once I've set up the settings and done some test shots, I might just hit go and then leave it for 6 hours. So what's kind of nice about that is I can set up the tripod, I can point it, I can click go, and then I can go sit by the campfire or go play a game or go have a walk or something, chat with Taylor. And it kind of opens the door to almost it becoming a passive activity. So what I tend to do is I like doing a lot of travel where I'll do the wildlife expeditions during the day, and then I'll be scoping out the astro locations during the day for where I will go at night. And then at night I'll set it up and kind of relax. So they actually end up complementing each other really nicely. So then, for example, when I first started getting into NFTs, it was probably 2021. I would say maybe September, like just after the DeFi summer, which I unfortunately was not a part of. But my first NFT that I ended up putting out was a shot from Madagascar. It was called Awe, and it was an animation that I made taking time-lapse photos in Madagascar, and I animated the photo to show the movement of my headlamp going across the screen, and I animated it to be actually a breathing guide for reducing anxiety and increasing mindfulness. So for me, I thought that that was a cool way to begin encapsulating my creative pursuits, my artistic pursuits, and focused really on the core of what really inspired me to become more of a photographer, which was astrophotography. So I think that was a cool way for me to bring in something that's perhaps a little more rare because most people don't have the skills to take shots like that to kind of start off my collectible career with a bit of a bang, while also touching on some more emotional side of things. Like when I was a kid, we used to watch meteor showers when camping, and we would do that as a family. So there was an emotional tie to these types of astrophotography pursuits, and I thought that was a cool way to have my genesis in the crypto space. And that one actually ended up being purchased by Sinister Gates, the lead guitarist of Avenged Sevenfold. So that was also a bit of like a shocking wake up call to the people that were involved in the crypto ecosystem.
You did show me that NFT and it was spectacular. So there'll be a link to that in the description. So if you want to check it out, the famous NFT that put Callum on the map, that is the one. So you mentioned mindfulness, and I think this is something that's increasingly important right now in our time. Everyone is overloaded with information. We have responsibilities, we have jobs, we have traffic, we have commuting, we have just so many things bombarding us at all times. And you did mention that you did take time away from your professional life to focus a little bit on yourself. So, what made you start prioritizing your mindfulness? And as someone who, has to set a lot of these boundaries yourself, do you have any advice for other people who are trying to maybe going through a slightly rockier patch in their life? Is there something that they can do to kind of help tether themselves a little bit more?
I think the wake up call for me was that trip to Africa because for the first time in years, I guess for context, I had just finished articling, which is an internship for law, and it burnt me out. I was pretty fried. It's a lot of hours, pretty intense thinking from 9 a.m. till 11 p.m. regularly. So for me, going to Africa, I actually got to step away from everything for a little while. And in particular, I was doing a road trip through Namibia, and there was 5 or 6 days, 7 days of just no internet access, no cell reception. So you really were forced to step back and take a look at the world as it was rather than what people are telling you it should be. It was away from all the notifications and all of the emails and a lot of the distraction, the voices of other people. And I could kind of just be. So when I came back from Africa, I was gone for almost 3 months. I did a big trip all around South Africa, like Southern Africa, went over to East Africa and then Madagascar. And when I came back, I was just shocked by how tethered people were to their phones. I'm sure I was like that too, and I definitely go through phases where I still am, so no judgment. But I was very surprised at how much. People were just at the beck and call of whatever notifications were popping up on their phones all the time. So that really started me thinking a bit more about attention and the impact that these technologies are having on our ability to actually control our attention. And I've been using the Headspace app a little bit, which is a meditation app, but I didn't really get very deep into, I would say, mindfulness or meditation through that app until I discovered the Waking Up app, which is an app by Sam Harris. And that one, I would say, if Headspace got me to level 1 of mindfulness and meditation, the Waking Up app got me to level 5 or whatever, approaching the higher levels. So this was probably at the beginning of the pandemic. There were a lot of stressful things happening. We were in lockdown, and I realized that I was starting to have a lot more anxiety about even just going outside, things that I hadn't really considered would be contributing to my way of living. So that was kind of a wake-up call, and I found the Waking Up app to be incredibly helpful. So there was an intro series that you could go through. It was a 30-day course, and it was just kind of an intro to mindfulness. And then there are all of these other series that you can get into for specific problems like procrastination or anxiety or whatever your issue is that you're having. There's a series from some expert in the app. So I really started to dive deep into that, and I think I woke up. Like, I really saw kind of the dream that I was having in Africa as I was beginning to wake up with that attention and my mindful awareness of the lack of attention of myself and many people. And that almost, it kind of felt a bit like a switch being turned on, where I realized truly that there's kind of only two ways of living. You can either be mindful or mindless. You can either be actively engaging with the world around you and being aware of what's happening, or you can be reacting to it. And I started to realize just how many people, including myself, spend so much of our days reacting instead of acting. And that just really started the rabbit hole of me diving deeper into improving my awareness and generally trying to become more mindful in my life. I would say that in terms of how other people could get started with this, like I have on my phone, you can set different focus modes. I have an iPhone, but I'm sure this is on Android as well. And I just have a mindfulness mode. And in mindfulness mode, I don't get notifications aside from phone calls. So I spend much of my day with my phone just completely muted of all notifications. And that really does open the door to a lot more development of attention in the long run because I'm not constantly being inundated by people or apps trying to get my attention. And I think when you start to really become aware of all of the things that are trying to get your attention, mining it like social media, that's when you really start to be able to actually make that change and recalibrate your existence a little bit to start to actually recognize what's working and what's not working and how much of things aren't working. So you can actually start taking that positive action to make a change that will improve your mental health.
For the listeners at the back, the ones who didn't hear this, the do not disturb mode on your phone needs to be used. It is helpful. It'll help you disconnect. I'm a big fan of it. So thank you so much for bringing that up, Cal. As someone who works independently, you set all of your own deadlines. As someone who has also had experience with feeling anxious thoughts as well, how do you balance the pressure of self-imposed deadlines with the anxiety of, you having to meet these deadlines?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's something I'm constantly working on. I think by burning out so intensely at my legal job, it really gave me awareness of what it feels like to burn out. And by taking that time when I quit I pretty much just took 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months to just explore whatever I felt like doing to really not try to pressure myself into anything in particular. And it's kind of funny because when I was doing this, I ended up researching a ton of artificial intelligence and second brains and just generally the way that we can use emerging technology. And a lot of people were like, that doesn't seem restful. But for me, what I realized what was burning me out was my inability to pursue the things that I was actually passionate about. I felt blocked from learning the things that I actually wanted to, and that was contributing to the burnout. So by going through that burnout phase so intensely and then taking some time to reflect on it, I did a ton of journaling. I went to therapy and then journaled about therapy. That was incredibly helpful. And I think I've kind of trained myself now to recognize that feeling of burnout when it first starts to come in. It almost feels like a bit of a pressure in my head. I can start to recognize, oh, okay, maybe I should take a step back for a moment. Maybe I should go for a walk. Maybe I should do a yoga session or do a mindfulness session in the Waking Up app. So I think it's really becoming aware of when you start to hit that fraying point where you start to burn out, that I'm better able now to recognize, okay, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go work out, I'm going to go take a break. I walk down to the water all the time, like Ontario, and just sit and watch the waves. So I find that very helpful. But in terms of the self-imposed deadlines, it's something that I was very bad at to begin with. And I feel like until I really got going with YouTube in the last month and a bit, 2 months, it was something I struggled with a lot. I would find it hard to stay consistently focused on one thing that would actually be continuing to build. And I think in hindsight now, part of that reason is because what I was doing wasn't the proper fit. These things were contributing more to the burnout than they were to the fulfillment. So I think there's also value in beginning to recognize when your body is actually trying to tell you something, like something doesn't feel right. And that comes back to awareness, which is increased from mindfulness. So I go through phases, I would say, of doing like deep work, intense work, and then I might just take a month where I don't really do anything and I just read books like fiction. I love sci-fi and fantasy, so I will just escape into other worlds. And yeah, I guess so just developing almost coping mechanisms for what works for you as an individual and testing out new things. That's what I found to be the most helpful.
Amazing. Amazing segue as well, because I would love to talk to you about sci-fi. For those listeners who do not know, I'm a massive sci-fi fan, and realizing that Callum was a sci-fi fan the first time I met him was great, because meeting like-minded people, especially who have these nerdy rabbit holes, is ideal. So I really wanted to ask you, which sci-fi works do you think have influenced you in an outsized sort of way? It could be implanting fear in your head. It could be making you a little bit more hopeful. Could be the combination of the two, and it just could be a way of framing reality around you. Are there any seminal works that you think my listeners should be prioritizing and moving to the top of their reading list?
So probably no surprise, but Dune, I would say, is one of the biggest ones. I actually just reread all the books last year. And I would say that the reason it's so impactful is because it's the concept of prescience, the ability to look forward into the future, to see the potential paths that we have walking forward, and then to be able to navigate all of those potential paths and select the ones that are going to be maybe not optimal, but at least not the bad ones. So I think reading Dune and then watching the movies too. I love Hans Zimmer, so I would say that the Dune movies also had a large impact, just bringing in some more of the emotional side of things, which I think sci-fi can often struggle with for many people. I think that the reason Dune has such a large impact is because it's all about looking to the past and remembering the experience of your ancestors. This is the whole Ben Gesserit. They are able to tap into the history of their previous members, the sisters, and Paul Atreides, the main character, is able to also tap into this as well and look forward with the knowledge of the past. And I think what we tend to struggle with as society now is actually engaging with information in a way that we recognize the important pieces and can actually leverage them moving forward. I think a lot of people are just so overwhelmed by information all the time that it all kind of ends up being a blur. And then people often end up almost just in this content state where they don't really improve and they don't really get worse. They kind of just stagnate moving forward. So I think Dune enables us to consider the power of remembering the important facets of what's happened in the past, and then also walks through a lot of philosophy on what it means to be human. And I think moving forward in the age of artificial intelligence, that's going to become more important than ever. In Dune, there's something called the Butlerian Jihad, which is when the robots effectively rose up, machines that could think for themselves. So there's a lot of commentary contrasting humanity with these artificial thinking machines. And I think it's really easy for people to lose the thread of empathy of the past and actually project that forward when we become overwhelmed by information. It removes empathy and people become apathetic. So I think Dune is also a big story about kind of tapping into true humanity. That's the whole Fremen element. So, and one other thing, Frank Herbert, my understanding is that he was a speechwriter, I think, for the Senate or for a senator. So there's a lot of philosophy that's just built into Dune that gets progressively deeper the more you get into the series. So I think it's also cool to, once you've finished the series, realize that you could restart it and look at it from a completely new perspective. So you could probably read Dune as many times as you want, and you would get something new out of it every time. And I think that's the mark of an incredible story.
Does the wildlife photographer in you ever look into the little threads of the ecosystems that he's written about in the books?
In terms of the environmental?
The environmental aspects of Dune, how little facets keep playing off each other.
Yeah, so I actually took an online course by Brandon Sanderson, another sci-fi fantasy writer, and it was all on storytelling and writing for sci-fi and fantasy. And he did a lot of analysis of Dune. And it was really cool to consider how what Frank Herbert did was he introduced the concept of spice, and that ended up being like the core magical element that permeates the entire universe. It's this planet, Dune, that's able to naturally produce this spice that can't be found anywhere in the universe, and it ends up giving power to the navigators in space to not crash into things, basically, to travel at ridiculous speeds. So I think it's cool how he took that core concept of this Dune planet being able to produce spice and then projected that throughout the whole universe for making this planet a unique ecosystem in and of itself. And he was also a big environmentalist too. So it's interesting how they have people who are like terraformers on the planet who are working to try and make it a safer place for people after the previous generations had failed and the planet basically became just like a giant Sahara. So I think that's an interesting way to bring in like a warning for how to take care of our planet and the ecosystems that we have. So I definitely think about that a lot when I'm shooting wildlife with a camera.
So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the learning how to learn stuff, because you are a YouTube educator. You're someone who makes very well produced videos that are focused. You choose a topic, you choose a facet of a complicated platform, and you work through it exhaustively. And not just exhaustively, you show your workflow, you show examples, and it's very actionable. So firstly, what made you want to be an educator and a creator in this manner? And what's your process with finding new software and new platforms that you really believe people should be getting their hands on right now?
I think this comes back to my interest in being an intellectual property lawyer and being a patent agent. As a patent agent, my entire job was to speak with inventors, with engineers and scientists, and try to get to really the core of whatever their idea was. A patent is effectively you have an idea core and you expand on that to give more context. So what that core idea is incredibly important. So over the years, I got really good at speaking with inventors and helping walk them through their own thoughts and ideas when they might be disagreeing with, if there's 3 or 4 inventors, maybe they didn't quite agree on what the core idea was. But I would take all of the information that they were giving me, format it, filter it, process it, and then present my idea on what that core was. And more often than not, they were surprised at how simply I was able to express this complicated issue, this complicated idea. So that kind of was a bit of a wake up to me at perhaps I'm better at doing this than a lot of people. I think I have a natural inclination towards understanding complex concepts and then expressing it to people. And I found myself more and more enjoying the explaining side of things, the teaching people side of things, than I did the actual sitting and writing the patents. So that was kind of a bit of a wake up call to think, oh, maybe I actually prefer being an educator and a storyteller, someone that's able to take a look at the world and try to distill the complexity and present it in a simple way to others that could really have a profound impact on their lives. Like we've talked about, there's a lot of information overload right now. And I think that I've been finessing my system on how to filter this information for many years and really crafting something that helps me and prevents me from getting overwhelmed. And I thought to myself, well, okay, I could keep writing these patents, I could keep doing one thing at a time, but I'm not having the reach that perhaps I could have. And when I would talk to people one-on-one, they would often leave the conversation saying, "Oh, wow, I hadn't thought of that. That's so interesting. Thanks for explaining it. You made it so simple and easy to understand." And I realized, well, if I did something like that on YouTube, maybe I could reach a lot more people and have a broader impact using some of my natural skills and the ones that I've been developing over the years through engineering and law school. So I think it's all about just trying to help as many people as possible. And I think a lot of people try to do what they're expected to, and you end up with a lot of just repetitive, surface level information, and you don't really get into the depth that a lot of these topics require. For example, if you're talking about artificial intelligence and tools that use artificial intelligence, if you don't mention something about privacy and data protection and what's happening with your information, you're potentially misleading people on the value of a tool. So I think what I was seeing too is with a lot of YouTube videos, people were giving these surface level explanations on how to use the software, which is great. That's totally fine. They're 10 to 15 minutes long, and I'm sure they help tons of people. But, and this goes back to the attention economy and the shortening of attention spans, I personally like deep diving into things. So I figured, well, if everyone else is making these 10 to 15-minute long videos, maybe I'll make a 30-minute long video that will actually show people the true use case of this information and why I think it's valuable, especially coming from the perspective of an intellectual property lawyer and a patent agent who has spent many years truly monetizing ideas and helping creators and inventors protect their ideas. So maybe I could not just go a little bit deeper, but also point people in a direction that could allow them to monetize their own ideas in the future. And perhaps maybe not go down the same path that I did, where I felt I had to do this traditional system first before becoming a creator and someone who's operating in the creator economy with my digital identity. Maybe I could give people tools that I wish I had when I first started to expedite their path in this new ecosystem.
The detail that you need to get into in order to teach somebody about anything. How do you think this benefits your overall understanding of these topics, and how often does it open up, ideas for your next video, for example?
So it's kind of funny. My videos that tend to perform the best are the ones that I put the least amount of preparation into, and I just sit down at the new software and I completely wing it. This is what I did with Manifold when I was making my smart contract tutorial videos. That was actually what inspired me to get into YouTube because I wanted to learn more about smart contracts and selling my photography as NFTs. And there weren't good resources explaining how to do it in a safe way. So I'm like, okay, I'll sit here and I'll just learn and I'll just screen record myself as I learn, explaining what I'm doing as I'm doing it. And that ended up getting quite a lot of traction. I think my first video got like 11,000 views, which was pretty shocking for publishing my effectively first YouTube video. And the other one that's performed incredibly well was the Notebook LM video, which is Google's AI software. And same with that one. I had only used it once, and then I sat down and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to walk through everything about this software that excites me. And then as ideas come into my head, I'm just going to talk about them. So I think that the going into recording these videos with an exploratory mindset of recognizing that I don't exactly know what this is going to entail, there's this unknown element, will actually perhaps spark some insights and some ideas that I might not have thought of if I wasn't trying to explain this to someone. And this reminds me of the Feynman technique of teaching. Richard Feynman, who is a nanotechnologist, quantum physics scientist, and he's known as the great explainer. So he's someone that I'm trying to emulate with teaching people. And one of his mantras or techniques is that if you're trying to teach someone something and you struggle to find the words to explain it, it means that you don't understand it well enough, and you should go back and spend some time learning it so that you can actually present the information clearly to someone. So ever since I came across that concept a couple of years ago, that's really stuck in my head, and I try to emulate that with my YouTube channel, where I'll sit and I'm like, okay, I think that I understand this. The true measure of me understanding this is my ability to explain this to someone else in a way that they actually then understand it as well. So a lot of what I'm trying to do with YouTube is take the things that I know are important but might not have explored fully myself and then go and explore it and dive deeper into the unknown and just see what surfaces. And then in terms of how new ideas come to mind, I realized that I hit a block. And I'm like, oh, okay, I probably should talk about privacy and artificial intelligence, but I don't really have the research at the moment to understand how to do this in an effective way. So I'll just mention that I'll make this in a new video in the future. And then that just goes into my idea inbox for YouTube in Obsidian. So I would say that's, I guess, on one side of it. And the other side would be with something like Obsidian. I realized early on the value of having a data set that can be used to train AI models, and actually having this private ecosystem that is offline and local to your own computer, and the ability to construct and build and work with that database to generate effectively a knowledge base that can then be plugged into artificial intelligence in the future. So for Obsidian, that's one where I didn't just sit and wing it. I have been thinking about this and writing my newsletter for 2 years, explaining these concepts in depth and tying in a lot of knowledge theory and intellectual property. So the Obsidian ones are more, I would say, premeditated. So I kind of have two different sides to what I'm doing with YouTube.
So you mentioned very clearly how you keep uncovering new pieces of information, going into them, getting in deeper into them. But have you ever discovered that you learned something wrong or learned an incorrect process? Could you tell me about how it was unlearning that and then replacing it with something that you may think is better suited for you going forward?
To be honest, that doesn't really happen often.
Okay.
I think that over the years, I've really carefully been fine tuning my intuition on what is right for me versus what is wrong for me. And I think with my legal training, I'm very cautious about overstepping what I'm saying and perhaps giving incorrect information. So when this happens, when I'm making a video, when I go back and listen to it and edit it and trim the audio and kind of do my cuts, if I'm listening to something and it just doesn't come across right in my mind, I almost like a little warning flag appears where I think, oh, you know what? I've said that too strongly. I've stated this that like A is true, but I didn't perhaps mention that B could also be true. Then maybe I'll just cut that clip. And that also might then become a new video where I recognize, okay, there's this discrepancy or this contradiction or something that I don't understand. I'll make a note of it, and that might end up being a new video because clearly in that moment where I was just following my intuition, making that YouTube video, something didn't click quite right that I thought I knew it, but I didn't. So I would say it's not often a process of unlearning something. It's more training myself to recognize if I've overstepped. And I think that comes from law because a lot of lawyers are very risk adverse. One word, for example, could be the difference between someone getting $100 million in a patent or not. So my training as a patent agent, like every single word is analyzed so intensely. And I think that kind of passes on to my education videos on YouTube, just for being cautious about misrepresenting things.
So could you give me some advice actually so we can like I'm sure a lot of us have parents who are now going to be exposed to a lot more AI written content, a lot more misinformation, disinformation. Do you have a checklist, for example, on how we can help communicate the need for this sense of caution to people who may need to hear about it a little bit more?
What I tend to tell people is that they should DYOR, do your own research. I think a lot of people just read headlines, and that's incredibly dangerous because the headline will pop up. It says something that may or may not be true, and then people just pass it on and it goes viral, and we end up having this spread of misinformation or disinformation. So that's partially what I've been trying to do with these YouTube videos. When I was making the Obsidian for Beginners video, I had my parents and Taylor's parents in mind because they had expressed some interest in it, but were completely lost at how Obsidian works. So I've been trying to make videos that make these resources to people that cause them to think, oh, okay, if I'm bringing in information into my vault, into Obsidian, what's the source? Where did I get it from? Is it credible? What is it actually saying here? So I think that the best way is to actually not just to try to give people a specific checklist, for example, but instead try to teach them critical thinking. And I think that's something that social media is deteriorating because everyone is just interested in 7 to 15-second sound bites on information. And I think that's the true danger here, is that people take that as fact when it could be taken out of context. So I think by using tools like Notebook LM and Obsidian, and just generally showing my research process, one that's been trained by going to school for engineering and then school for law and then becoming a patent agent, the credibility of information is incredibly important. And the ability to assess that credibility, I think, is even more important. And that's something that I think a lot of people are missing out on. They just want the quick fix. But I think with artificial intelligence now, we should never be taking anything just at face value. You should always be corroborating and trying to find another source that validates the information. And I think at some point, blockchain could come into this, where, for example, you think that you're getting something like an article from the New York Times because it says it's an article from the New York Times, but if you actually click into it, you realize that it's just a dummy link that sent someone somewhere else. So we could potentially begin bringing in universal sources of truth, where if you want to go check the New York Times, you click on it, and then you can have some automated software that validates, does this match the source exactly? Um, but I would just say, in general, for people, like, be careful of the links you click on, and get comfortable doing your own research by going to Google or going to whatever your preferred browser is and validating the information itself.
Especially if you hold crypto on your device, people. Do not click on random links. People much, much, much more experienced than you in this space have fallen for those very traps. We've spoken about how AI can open a bit of a can of worms when it comes to misinformation and being a problem. But also now let's flip this equation on its head a little bit, because I think no foray into the new internet is complete without understanding not all the tools of AI, because that's an ever increasing snowball, but what AI tools have you embraced as part of your workflow, and which do you find essential, and which do you think are actually scarily good, maybe?
The ones I use the most are ChatGPT, Notebook LM, Adobe Firefly, which is the image generator of Adobe, and Premiere Pro for editing that has some AI with the transcription. So I would say that I use ChatGPT almost like a brainstorming buddy, where I will ask for specific information, maybe give a brief outline on what I'm looking for, and then use it to kind of double check to see, is this what I thought, or are there other avenues that I could explore? So, but with ChatGPT, I know that a lot of my information is potentially being sent to OpenAI for model training. So I'm cautious about the information that I put in there. For example, I would never put anything related to a patent or a patentable idea into OpenAI. Uh, they have transparency mode, which allows you to not submit the data for training. But in patents, there's this concept of public disclosure, where if something is publicly disclosed, it can shoot you in the foot and completely stop you from being able to get a patent around the world. So some things are just not worth the risk, in my opinion. So I like to use ChatGPT almost on a conversational uh, format, where I'm bouncing ideas back and forth and perhaps getting some information, especially now that it has the search function, so I can update its knowledge. But I prefer to use Notebook LM for working with information that I've already accumulated. And this is where I think we can start to use AI to really help reduce information overload. For example, in the Notebook LM video I made, I added all of my newsletters into a notebook, and then I could ask Notebook LM questions about the newsletters that I had already written. So instead of working with new information that I'm getting from the internet or from ChatGPT, I'm now working with my knowledge, something that I've already worked to filter the information and forge knowledge from it. And that ends up being a lot more sustainable, I think, than just constantly consuming new information, to work with your existing knowledge base rather than starting from scratch all the time. So I really liked that opportunity. For example, you could extract snippets from my YouTube videos and have it automatically format them as tweets or as short form content for Instagram, as posts using my own words. So, in that sense, it feels a lot more authentic too, because it's just using AI as a curator of my own content rather than generating something new. And that's what excites me about these RAG based tools, retrieval augmented generation, where you can kind of think of the AI as like a librarian that's accessing your existing knowledge rather than researcher going to the internet. And then I use Adobe Firefly for generating my thumbnails. Um, I personally find it a lot of fun to generate images based on prompts. I think it's actually a cool way that you can start to even perhaps have your subconscious show through in a visual form, which I think is incredibly exciting for boosting your own self-awareness. I've often included a prompt to something, and then the AI picked up on something that I was intending but didn't say. And that's where it starts to get perhaps a little scary because it's able to pick up on things that I wasn't even aware of. But that's a pretty, I would say, innocent situation. So that doesn't scare me as much. But I think overall, the use of AI tools, I haven't really had too many moments where I felt truly scared by it in terms of what it's able to do, aside from the potential societal and economic impacts that it can have for removing the value that knowledge workers or creators are producing. Like that type of shift in our overarching like societal system scares me more than the individual tools. But I haven't really seen any tool at the moment that has made me think, "Oh, this is it. Like, we've reached AGI, for example. We're done here."
So I was really impressed with using Midjourney for making image prompts for this podcast as well. So I was looking at AI tools that could make help me make stuff that was commercially viable. So I had commercial licenses for them, and only Adobe Firefly and Midjourney were offering these two things.
Interesting.
Consider this a commercial activity. So I didn't want to risk anything with the rights, because you never know how these things are trained, how the buck can drop on you one day, sort of. So same thing with AI generated music. I've heard so many stories about, like, it sounds amazing. Like, that is something that did scare me a little bit. Like, you just type in a prompt with, oh, make me a backing track inspired by crosses. And it made me a brilliant song that was eerily close. And I was like, okay, this is almost worrying because music is something that we've almost commoditized right now. Something that's so easy to consume will become effortless to create. And that is slightly worrying to me. So, is there anything that us as creatives can do to retain some sense of control without, missing out on this AI boom as well?
I think being mindful and intentional of the tools that you're using is key. I would recommend going to the privacy policy and the terms of use of every AI software that you use. You can probably just search for intellectual property and see what it says about that. Like in some tools, you give up all rights. So everything you're creating gets given to the company and you aren't allowed to commercialize it. Maybe that's not a tool that you should use because there's probably 10 alternatives that maybe would be safer to use. For Firefly, the reason I chose it and that I haven't used any other AI generative art creators is because Firefly has been trained by licensed material and copyright safe material. So as an intellectual property lawyer, I was concerned about that, even though I know people have their own issues with Adobe for many reasons. From an intellectual property standpoint and the viability of using these tools commercially, it seemed the safest. I hadn't heard that actually about Midjourney, so I'll look into that. That's exciting. My guess is that they've just changed the way the model was trained to use commercially safe materials.
Right. So, and I think what you mentioned about the privacy aspects, I think that's sort of what pushed you towards both Obsidian and Notebook LM. Is that true? So, could you tell me a little bit more about how they respect your privacy and respect your information, and why you think that these were the platforms that you think deserve your attention as a creator?
Yeah, so actually, my 11th newsletter was called Augmented Personal Knowledge Management. And that's the one where I really dove into proprietary information and how could I be developing a system that would allow me to capture my thoughts and ideas and knowledge and store it in a way that was inaccessible by artificial intelligence. It was something that was just local for me and also produce what's called a knowledge graph, where you're able to start linking your information in different ways and forming knowledge from it. And when I was doing research into that, I realized this is going to be the absolutely perfect form to plug into artificial intelligence in the future. Like knowledge graphs are just what AIs thrive on. This is what Google's been operating with for years. So I was kind of on the lookout for something that would complement Obsidian because Obsidian is just a local software. It's freeware, it doesn't cost anything. and all of the files are created as Markdown, which is effectively the most interoperable text-based form of saving a file that you can have. So I was trying to come up with a system that would allow me to generate something that would completely future-proof whatever it was I wanted to use this tool for, and this knowledge base that I had been building. So that's why I chose Obsidian, because there's no privacy issues. Everything is just local on your computer, and it operates in Markdown, so you're future-proofing yourself. And then, because it's in Markdown, there's 3,000 plugins that can be layered on top of the Markdown and can interpret the data in different ways. So some of those involve artificial intelligence, which is another great way to connect Obsidian to an AI tool. And you can even use a local model where you would just be hosting effectively a copy of ChatGPT on your computer, and then you could run your Obsidian files through that without any of the information being sent to OpenAI. So that to me that's the ultimate scenario, is being able to use that type of system. And I'll be getting more into that once I finish my basic series on Obsidian. But in the meantime, I wanted to find a tool that would just help me parse my own information, and just kind of like the idea generator that I've been using ChatGPT for, but something that was based purely on my own information, working with my own knowledge instead of information. And when I came across Notebook LM, I was like, okay, that's interesting, because their headline is, "We do not use your information for training their AI model." Like, perfect. Every other system I've used, they do use it for training their model, so this one is different. That's great. And it is true, but there's also a bit of a catch in terms of the privacy perspective, which I made a specific video on the privacy of Notebook LM and the importance of looking at privacy policies for AI tools. And there's a potential issue where if you provide feedback to the model, even though you're not sending it to training, a human reviewer could look at it. So you might end up not having the information remain private or confidential, even if it's not being sent to the model for training it. So it's kind of a fine distinction, but if you're dealing with confidential information, it for sure would be a reason not to use this tool.
What do you think of dropping privacy policies into Notebook LM and then asking Notebook LM about the policies of the next software I want to use? Is this a viable way to do things, or am I trusting Notebook LM too much?
I think it's kind of like the crypto mantra, which is don't trust, verify. So I think it's a great way to improve your understanding of a privacy policy that's probably quite confusing. But that said, these AI systems make mistakes. So if you're just using it for your own podcast, for example, or for your own interests, or like my YouTube videos, worst case, I just have to take the post down, not the end of the world. If I'm doing client work or consulting and I'm putting people's confidential information in there, that's a different story, because now it's not myself that I'm potentially going to be liable for, and I can make that informed choice myself. I may be making that choice for someone else that didn't consent. So I would say, depends on the intensity that you're looking for protection. But I've definitely done that with AI tools where I drop in privacy policies, terms of use, and usually what I will do is use it to pinpoint the concerning sections of the privacy policy, and then I'll read just that section myself.
Is there a video that you think encapsulates you the best?
So I would say depends what they're looking for. If they're interested in me and how I became a creator and why I took this path, I have a playlist called My Philosophy Recalibrating, or Recalibrating My Philosophy. And I go through some thoughts on the current state of the world and why I quit being a lawyer and why I went into the creator economy. So that, I think, is perhaps relatable to people who are looking to make a change in their life and shift things around, which I think can be a very daunting and scary step into the unknown. It's the one fear to rule them all, is the fear of the unknown. So I think if people are looking to make that change, I would recommend checking out that playlist. From the actual overarching creator economy perspective, I have a video on digital identity. I think I call it Your Ticket to the Creator Economy. And that one I actually walk through much more in depth on how this ecosystem works and why it's a feasible career path. Something that I think a lot of people perhaps have touched the surface of, but didn't go deep into it. So it's like a half-hour video or 25-minute video that goes much more into the actual practical implementation of how your digital identity can be used as your personal brand to really make an alternate career path. So I would recommend that one to anyone who's looking at getting into the creator economy, just for context on how it all works. And then from the knowledge perspective, and really everything that I've been doing with YouTube and Obsidian and Notebook LM, I just put out a video last week called What is Zettelkasten in Note-Taking, and it's a specific implementation of a more complex note-taking system, but I go through a lot of knowledge theory, and people have told me that that is what they actually found the most helpful for understanding on how these tools can all connect together and how we can really begin reducing information overload and that feeling of overwhelm or overthinking. So I would recommend that one if people are looking more for an overview of how to work with knowledge in this modern information overload society.
And what sort of content can your hopefully new subscribers look forward to over the next year? Which topics do you think deserve the most attention for you to start explaining in detail over the next year?
Yeah, there's a couple. I've been thinking about this a lot as we reach the end of the year and just reflecting on 2024 and where everything's going in 2025. I've been setting, I would say, the foundation of how these tools operate and my theories on how they can be used. So my plan for 2025 is to start getting more into practical implementations of them. Once I've explained the why and the how, it starts to get into the what and the more the depth on these topics. So I want to explore more mindfulness. That's my plan, is to start bringing that in a little bit more. With Obsidian, I'm teaching people how they can use writing software, and writing is one of the best ways that you can improve your self-awareness. So I want to help people along that path because, kind of like we talked about at the beginning, I think a lot of people react instead of act. So if I can help even a few more people start to be mindful with their activities and boost their own self-awareness, I think that that could have a lot of knock-on positive effects throughout the world, paying it forward. So my plan is to introduce some more mindfulness. And then I also want to start doing research on more complicated topics that start to show people more practical implementations of the tools that I'm using, like Notebook LM and Obsidian. Because once you understand what the software is and how it works, I think that it's really helpful to see the use cases and kind of like an over-the-shoulder walkthrough of how I'm actually using this on a day-to-day basis. So that's kind of my plan, is to bring in more of those real-world use cases. And then I also want to explore agentic AI agent frameworks. That's been on my list for a while, but I had spent so much time focusing on explaining tools like Notebook LM and Obsidian in my newsletter that I felt as though I needed to kind of offload them into videos before I could dive deeper into some stuff that might be a little more complex. So I guess for my new subscribers, I'm hoping that they feel they have a solid foundation on how to work with knowledge and information so that they're better prepared for dealing with new tools that come out and how they can continue filtering the world. And I am interested in, I guess, learning what they're interested in too. I've started my YouTube membership where I'm going to be asked, I have polls that I'll put out where I'm taking requests for what people are looking for in videos. So that's also something that I found incredibly helpful, is I might think I know something and I feel like I've explained the whole thing. And then I have 10 comments that all ask the same question and I realize, oh, okay, maybe I should go deeper into this topic. So getting the feedback has been really rewarding, surprising, and exciting, I would say. So I'm looking forward to continuing to build out the community side of YouTube now that I kind of have this foundational content base.
So, what about the other folks who may not be as comfortable with, starting something afresh, being really bad at something for maybe a considerable amount of time? Like, do you have any advice, any ways that we can, help people stay motivated over that initial hump of realizing, oh no, I'm really not that good at this thing?
Yeah, so I saw that question earlier and I thought that was an excellent question. That was one that gave me pause because I think that is a very valuable skill for people to learn. And I would say a couple thoughts. The first is that with that prime fear of the unknown, the one fear to rule them all, stepping into that unknown state, that new area, is always going to be the scariest thing that we do as a species. It's what we've evolved to be afraid of. So the fact that you feel that fear or that uncertainty, that doubt, the FUD, that's normal. And I think once people recognize that that's normal, it removes the pressure a little bit and they can start to be like, oh, okay, maybe this uncertainty is actually a good thing because I'm challenging myself. And once you overcome that, once you actually solve the problem, you learn the thing, you level up a little bit, then you get a boost of confidence. It's hard to put into words how valuable I think that is when you've truly solved that new thing. So if you can keep that moment in mind, that confidence, maybe you journal about it. You make a record of, hey, I learned this thing today. It felt awesome. I was incredibly frustrated. It took me 2 weeks and I finally solved it. I'm great, future me, remember this. I think that that adds a lot of value to the next time you go to do something. Maybe it's 6 months, depending on your learning frequency. And then maybe you're doubting yourself again, but you can go back and check that note that gave you that little vote of confidence. Remind yourself that not all is lost when you're frustrated and you can solve the problem. You can move forward and level up. And I think the more you do that, the more regularly you try new things, you fail at them and you try again and you succeed, whatever the iteration process is there. I think you truly do begin to recalibrate your perspective on what it means to exist as you, as a person, what that self awareness is. And the more you try those new things, the faster your self awareness will grow, the more you'll begin to develop what are called your metacognitive skills, which is thinking about thinking. And you begin to identify patterns in your own understanding and your own learning process that you can kind of template and then apply in the future. So I think part of the reason that a lot of people get so frustrated at new things is it's because it's the first new thing they've tried to do in a long time and they fail at it and they get frustrated and that stops them from moving forward. But the more you try and fail, the more you start to recognize those patterns, the more you can apply that pattern to yourself in the future, and the easier and easier it starts to become. So I think there is definitely a decay to the level of effort and uncertainty that comes from trying new things.
Great. So I hope that is motivation for you folks to head over to Callum's channel, subscribe, and get on this continuous learning train. So Callum, where could the people find you, and on which social networks are you active, and where do you prefer to nurture your community?
My main focus lately has been YouTube, so you can find me there at Wanderloots, and I've got my links set up there. I have my website at wanderloots.com. That's kind of the platform of all of my information, so people can also get anywhere. And then I actually have wanderloots.xyz, which is my digital garden, and that's just another place that I've been kind of directing people to be lower friction publishing, lower friction exploration. And in terms of actual social media, I would say Warpcast, Farcaster is where I spend most of my time. I am on Instagram and X, but I don't really use them all that often. I know that Farcaster can be a block for lots of people, so I'm still trying to think on how I can begin integrating these tools together a little bit better. I'm hoping that Hypersub helps with that, so I'm planning on making Hypersub more of my core community base, and I have some fun ideas on how to expand that with token gating in the near future. So that's something that I've also been working on with the digital garden implementation. So yeah, I'm planning on adding a new tier to my Hypersub in the new year, and I'm going to be expanding a lot more on the community side of things. So I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you so much, Callum. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to what the next year has for us. So any final words for the audience?
I think that our current society tries to tell us that we have to be kind of cookie cutters. We have to follow one particular path. But I think that the internet has really opened the door to people truly being themselves and exploring themselves. So I would say to people to not be afraid of trying new things and of learning and of tracking how they're changing over time to begin mindfully improving their awareness of themselves. And I think if people start to do that, they will be happier and the world will be a better place. So I'm excited to help them on this journey. And I'm excited to see more people enter the creator economy and make podcasts like this, because this was really fun. So I appreciate very much being here.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming over. Like, it was an absolute pleasure chatting with you over this last hour or so. It's been truly fantastic. I'm sure everyone has a lot to learn from you. Please follow Callum across all social media. The links are in the description as always. This is Marv and Callum signing off. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will chat with you very, very soon. Take care.